8 years ago, my life took a turn I never could have predicted, an unimaginable twist that changed everything. It was the night my husband, Tom, confronted me about my affair with my boss, David. This wasn't some random revelation. Tom had grown increasingly suspicious of my behavior over time. He noticed the late nights at the office, the sudden, unexplained business trips, and most painfully, the widening emotional chasm between us. Slowly, I became a stranger to him, and that realization spurred him to start piecing everything together. Though Tom had a growing sense that something was amiss, neither of us could have foreseen the moment when he stumbled upon irrefutable evidence of the affair. The secret I had convinced myself was a passionate, albeit forbidden, love story turned out to be nothing more than a string of poor decisions I made during a particularly vulnerable and troubled phase in our marriage. The truth, as much as I hated to admit it, was that I had been unhappy for a long time. Instead of confronting the issues that plagued our relationship, I sought comfort and validation in someone else. David had entered my life 5 years after I began working at the company. He was charismatic, successful, and attentive, qualities that seemed to fill the emotional void I had been experiencing in my marriage. Tom, though a good man at heart, had grown distant over time, and the connection we once shared seemed to fade. David, on the other hand, made me feel seen, heard, and valued in ways that Tom had stopped doing. What began as innocent, work-related exchanges soon morphed into something darker and more addictive, a dangerous emotional entanglement. In my mind, I justified the affair, convincing myself that the thrill of secrecy was worth the risk. But now, looking back, I see how wrong I was. The consequences of my actions would soon overshadow any fleeting excitement or satisfaction I once felt. When Tom uncovered the evidence, the explicit emails that left no room for doubt, I had no choice but to admit the truth. The hurt, anger, and disbelief in his eyes overwhelmed me. Those emotions were seared into my memory, and I still carry them with me today. He left that night, and I didn't hear from him for 2 agonizing days. Those 2 days felt like an eternity. Consumed by guilt and the weight of my betrayal, I couldn't eat or sleep. When he finally returned, it was only to pack his things. He was leaving for good, and no matter what I said or did, nothing could change that. The months that followed were a blur of confusion, sorrow, and regret. I took a leave of absence from work because I couldn't bear the thought of facing David or our colleagues. The whispers, the judgment, and the pity in their eyes were unbearable. It felt as though everyone knew what had happened, and the idea of confronting them filled me with dread. Meanwhile, Tom wasted no time in filing for divorce. By that point, I didn't contest it. There was no reason to fight for something I had already destroyed. I had broken our marriage, and I knew it. I moved into a small, anonymous apartment across town, hoping to fade into the background and let time wash away the pain. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Fortunately, we didn't have children, so the legal process was relatively simple. But the emotional toll it took on me was anything but straightforward. Tom and I had been together for years, and our families were deeply intertwined. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. It felt like the end of an entire chapter of our lives. Some friends and family took sides, while others distanced themselves, unwilling to get involved in the mess of our failed relationship. The loneliness I felt during that time was suffocating. I knew I had brought it on myself, but that knowledge didn't make the pain any easier to bear. Eventually, I returned to work, but not at David's company. I resigned in the wake of everything and took a new job at a smaller firm where no one knew me or my past. It seemed like the fresh start I so desperately needed, but I quickly realized that no change of scenery or new job could erase the guilt I carried inside. I buried myself in work, hoping to avoid facing the harsh reality of my failures. But the truth was inescapable. I had destroyed everything that truly mattered to me, and nothing I did could undo that. In the years that followed, I began the painful, ongoing process of rebuilding my life. Therapy became my lifeline, forcing me to confront the choices I had made and examine the reasons I sought comfort outside my marriage. The affair wasn't just about David. It was a symptom of deeper issues within me, issues I had ignored for far too long. I had failed to communicate with Tom, to recognize the cracks in our relationship, and instead of working through those problems, I ran from them. I sought validation and attention from the wrong sources, and in doing so, I lost everything that truly mattered. Meanwhile, Tom began to move on with his life. Through mutual friends, I learned that he had started dating someone about a year after our divorce. Eventually, he met someone serious, Emily. She was everything I hadn't been, kind, grounded, and genuine. They seemed truly happy together, and a part of me felt a sense of relief knowing Tom had found someone who could offer him the stability and love I had failed to provide. Though the pain of our lost years lingered, I could no longer deny that he deserved better than what I had given him. In the end, I learned a hard but essential lesson, that seeking happiness through shortcuts or avoidance only leads to greater pain. True healing only comes when you confront the truth and take responsibility for your actions, no matter how difficult or uncomfortable it may be. 3 years after our divorce, I ran into Tom again at a mutual friend's wedding. Our interaction was cordial, but distant, as though an invisible barrier had been erected between us. Though time had passed, I could still see the pain lingering in his eyes, a reminder of the hurt I had caused. In that moment, a tidal wave of guilt crashed over me. I realized that some wounds never truly heal, no matter how much time has passed. The thought that Tom might never forgive me haunted me, and even more painfully, I wasn't sure if I would ever be able to forgive myself. 8 years ago, I shattered my life with a single decision, a choice that not only destroyed my marriage but irrevocably changed the course of both our lives. At the time, I couldn't fathom the idea of ever forgiving myself for the damage I had inflicted. The guilt and shame were suffocating, overwhelming in their intensity. But as the years wore on, therapy became an essential tool in my healing journey. Slowly, it helped me untangle the pain and face the truth of my actions. This process allowed me to begin rebuilding who I was. The road to healing was long and fraught with challenges, but I eventually understood that moving forward required accepting the past, taking responsibility for my mistakes, and learning from the choices that nearly destroyed everything. Rebuilding my life after the affair wasn't quick or simple, but it was a journey I knew I had to embark upon if I ever wanted to find peace and a chance at starting anew. The journey began with confronting the underlying reasons behind my actions. I understood that before I could heal, I needed to understand why I betrayed my ex-husband. I had to face the aspects of myself that led to such a reckless choice. The affair wasn't just about David. It was about confronting the emotional voids and insecurities that had driven me down that destructive path. This self-reflection wasn't easy. Looking at myself through such a critical lens was painful, but it was necessary. I had to accept the uncomfortable truths about who I had been if I wanted to heal and grow. One of the most pivotal steps I took was joining a support group for people affected by infidelity. The group consisted of both those who had been hurt and those who had caused the pain. Listening to their stories opened my eyes in ways I hadn't anticipated. I heard firsthand how deeply infidelity affected everyone involved, how it shattered trust, eroded self-worth, and left emotional scars that took years to heal. These stories made me realize the profound impact my affair had, not only on Tom but on me as well. The weight of my actions was far heavier than I had initially understood. I had always considered the pain I caused Tom, but hearing others' experiences helped me see the bigger picture. I began to understand that my affair wasn't just a betrayal of Tom, but also a betrayal of my own sense of self. This realization, though painful, was crucial. It forced me to question who I was and how I had allowed myself to make such a self-destructive choice. The affair had shattered my self-worth, leaving me to grapple with an identity I no longer recognized. I had been living in a distorted version of myself, shaped by dishonesty and selfishness. The person I had become wasn't someone I could be proud of, and I knew I had to change. Rebuilding myself wasn't easy. I had to peel back layers of denial and self-deception, confronting uncomfortable truths about my past. But I was determined to face it all. Over the years, I did the hard work, attending therapy, joining support groups, and, most importantly, being brutally honest with myself. Each day was a step toward reclaiming my life. While there were setbacks along the way, I knew I couldn't go backward. I had to move forward, no matter how difficult it felt. By the 5th year after my divorce, I had made significant progress. I had started a small business with a friend I met through my new job. It was something I had always dreamed of doing, but never had the courage to pursue until now. It wasn't just a career move. It was a symbol that I was capable of creating something positive after everything I had lost. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something meaningful. It wasn't a replacement for the life I had with Tom, but it was something I could be proud of. A reminder that life still offered chances to start over and find happiness again. Around that time, I learned that Tom had become engaged to a woman named Emily. I saw their engagement photos online, and a flood of emotions overwhelmed me. On one hand, I was genuinely happy for him. After everything he had been through, he deserved love, peace, and happiness. But another part of me couldn't shake the feeling of loss. I thought about the life that could have been mine if I had made different choices. If I had been stronger, more honest, and less selfish. That feeling was hard to shake. It was a stark reminder of the true cost of my decisions. 8 years had passed since that fateful night. The night that changed everything. Tom and Emily were married now, and had recently welcomed their first child. When I heard the news, I felt an impulse to reach out. I decided to send them a card, congratulating them and wishing them well. I didn't expect anything in return, so I was surprised when Tom reached out to me a few weeks later. He thanked me for the card and asked if I would be open to meeting for coffee. He said there were things he wanted to discuss. Not to rekindle anything, but to find closure. When we met, it felt like seeing an old friend after a long time. Familiar yet distant. We talked about the paths our lives had taken, how we had changed over the years, and what we had learned from the past. During our conversation, Tom admitted that although my affair had deeply hurt him, he had come to understand that we both played a role in the breakdown of our marriage. He expressed regret for not being more attentive, for not recognizing the signs that something was wrong, and for taking our relationship for granted. Hearing this didn't absolve me of my actions, but it did help me realize that he no longer saw me as a villain in our story. It reminded me that relationships are complex, and both partners contribute to their successes and failures. Tom told me that he had forgiven me, not for my sake, but for his own peace. He explained that holding on to anger for all those years had been exhausting, and he needed to let go of the past to fully embrace his new life. His forgiveness wasn't a way to erase my mistakes or excuse what had happened. It was a gift that allowed both of us to move forward. It gave us the closure we had never truly achieved until that moment. When our meeting ended, there was a sense of mutual understanding. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no rekindling of old feelings. Just a quiet acknowledgement that we had once shared a significant part of each other's lives. That chapter was now closed, and we were both ready to move on. Today, my business has grown beyond anything I ever imagined, and I've started dating again. This time, however, I approach relationships with a deeper understanding of myself and what I need. I've learned that true happiness doesn't come from fleeting excitement or distractions, but from the steady, patient work of building a life you can be proud of. The affair remains the most painful mistake I've ever made, but it taught me invaluable lessons I couldn't have learned any other way. I've learned to be honest with myself, to confront my flaws, and to strive to become a better version of who I am. Though the past can't be changed, and I will always carry the weight of my choices, that weight feels a little lighter as the years pass. I may have lost my marriage, but in doing so, I found something else myself. And sometimes, that is the hardest and most valuable discovery of all.